He who is of a proud heart stirs up strife, but he who trusts in the Lord will be prospered. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share some thoughts beginning with Proverbs chapter 28 and verse 25. He who is of a proud heart stirs up strife, but he who trusts in the Lord will be prospered. This proverb reminds us of probably the most famous verse in the book of Proverbs, which is, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." For there are situations in life where we need to trust. We either trust somebody else or we trust just in ourselves. But if we're going to trust in another, they must be trustworthy. And the only one who's ultimately trustworthy is the Lord himself. So the saying, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart." But we can only trust him to do the things he has said he will do. We can't trust him just to do what we want him to do. The following proverb, verse 26, says, "He who trusts in his own heart is a fool, but whoever walks wisely will be delivered." Wisdom comes from outside of ourselves. It's delivered to us. In fact, all true wisdom comes from God. One of the major themes of the book of Proverbs is knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Knowledge is the facts that we gain. Understanding concerns how those facts relate together. But wisdom is the decision that you make based on that understanding. And if the understanding is incomplete, and if the knowledge is incomplete, then the decisions are likely to be wrong. But since God has all knowledge and all understanding and all wisdom, if we follow him and trust in him, we will not fail. It's only because we do not have complete knowledge and understanding and do not have wisdom that we will fail if we trust in our own understanding. Therefore, we need to seek after the wisdom of God. Another proverb repeated is, "Be not wise in your own eyes. Trust the Lord, and he will deliver you." He who is of a proud heart stirs up strife. The big issue in our heart is the matter of pride. Pride was the devil's downfall. In Ezekiel 28, we see him presented as a king, as a beautiful angel in the Garden of Eden, with responsibility for guiding and protecting Adam and Eve. But, as we read in Genesis chapter 3, he decided he wanted to be worshipped himself. It was not sufficient for him to direct them to obey the Lord, and so he suggested they challenge God. He questioned what God had said and put those questions in their mind, and they followed up on the questions. Eve relied on her own understanding. The fruit looked good to eat. It was nutritious, and it would make her wise. So she took it and ate it, and disobeyed God. They trusted in their own thinking, but that thinking was based on misinformation that had been given to them. So the proud heart is the one that makes a decision contrary to what God has already said. The humble heart is the one who trusts the Lord in all circumstances, even when we don't understand what the Lord is doing and what the Lord is about. There are many examples of people who have failed to trust the Lord. Jeroboam was made the first king of the breakaway 10 tribes when they split from Judah and Benjamin under the reign of Rehoboam. And the Lord had told Jeroboam that if Jeroboam walked in God's ways, that he would prosper. But he didn't trust God. His rationalization was, if my people go and worship God up in Jerusalem, then they will turn back to Rehoboam and I'll lose my kingdom. He was of a proud heart and didn't want to lose his kingdom. And so he turned the hearts of the people away from the God of Israel to have them worship golden calves that he had manufactured. And he did not prosper. His dynasty ended because he didn't trust in the Lord. His proud heart thought that he had a better solution than the one that God had provided, but it was not. Absalom, David's son, was of a proud heart. He was brought up as prince, and after murdering his older brother Abner, he was the leading prince, and he saw himself as the new king, and he couldn't wait for his father to be dead to take up his role. And so he came up with a scheme of promoting himself and undermining, over a period of time, his father and his father's administration, telling everyone, I can do better than my father. He wasn't trusting the Lord, he was trusting himself. And eventually he overthrew his father, and David fled. But the Lord was with David, and the Lord helped David, and David was restored to the throne, and Absalom was killed, but not after a lot of strife. His proud heart stirred up strife, a civil war, where many people were killed. When Jesus was challenged, what is the greatest commandment? He quoted Deuteronomy, You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind and strength. And the second is like to it, from Leviticus, You shall love your neighbour as yourself. Both of these commandments mean humbling yourself. God above you, your neighbour beside you. But a proud heart puts yourself and your needs above that of the neighbour. When Paul was taking up a collection in Macedonia for the Christians who were suffering greatly in Judea, the principle he enunciated was not that we want to make the Christians in Judea rich and you poor, but that there should be equality. In other words, you don't need to give to a rich cause and starve the poor cause, but rather all causes that are just need to be supported according to their need. And when we see people in strife, then we need to give them support. Not to say, well, they deserve it, or I'm more important, it's important for me to live in comfort and ease, and it's their fault that they're in their situation. It may be their fault, in which case we should have sympathy and empathy with them, but it is likely to be somebody else's fault, in which case we should be even more empathetic with them. Pride is the sin of Satan. He stimulates pride in our heart. The Lord Jesus, who had the highest position as the Son of God and born with the title King of Israel, humbled himself in his life. He lived a life of poverty. He lived a life of service, always helping others, and he even submitted to false arrest, false accusation, spitting and mocking and beating, and crucifixion. But he did this that he might win our hearts towards God. For the ultimate purpose of our life is to know God and to walk with him. The Lord Jesus calls his disciples his friends because he shares his heart with us. And so the summary is that we shall humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God and let him lift us up in due time. He who trusts in the Lord will be prospered.